Hello, YouTube. Today, I want to touch upon the little studied topic of unusual incidents in the past, the descriptions of which raise legitimate questions. Of course, someone will consider these questions exaggerated, but an attempt at objective research requires paying attention to all the facts and evidence, even if they lead to unconventional thoughts and conclusions. Who knows what answers the questions we're asking today will lead to in the future? Many history devotees know about the Moscow fire of 1812, but studying the recorded eyewitness accounts, one comes to the conclusion that the matter was not limited to one habitual fire there, but that the incident was much more complicated. Thus, the French general Philippe Paul de Ségur, who was part of the Napoleon's entourage, wrote the following in his memoirs. 2 officers observed an extraordinary light, and that the flame engulfed the palaces. First, it illuminated the elegant and noble outlines of their architecture, and then it all collapsed. On the 9th of the 14th to the 15th, the fiery balloon descended over the palace and burned this building. Once again, an extraordinary light, a fireball, flames that bring down palaces and multi-story buildings, not incendiary but illuminating. Shortly after the start of the fire, according to the general's memoirs, illnesses began. The barracks were littered with sick soldiers and hospitals with wounded, dying by the hundreds. The wounded, struggling with death, were moaning. The whole city was turned into a cemetery. Not the most usual consequence of a traditional fire, don't you think? The description of the general strongly resembles some kind of explosion that caused radiation sickness. Could something radioactive have happened in the early 19th century? Look, if we don't ask these questions, we may never find the answer. But such incidents could occur in those days in different cities repeatedly. Here, for example, is what is depicted in an engraving from the 18th century. It shows a bright flash, but it's not the sun. This is an incomprehensible cloud in the epicenter of the globe. The recorded behavior of people also raises questions. Someone is trying to escape, someone is praying. It is unlikely that such a thing could happen when the sun rises. What disaster, what catastrophe is recorded in that engraving? Perhaps these incidents will eventually receive rational explanations. In the meantime, it is worth recognizing that there are no convincing answers explaining the data of the above-mentioned evidence. Therefore, all more or less well-founded hypotheses are acceptable for consideration, even if this approach is not liked by some orthodox-minded types who are afraid to go beyond such familiar old views. Something was clearly taking place. We don't know much about catastrophes and disasters, even of the recent times. For example, in Russia, the hugely severe flood of 1824 in St. Petersburg is practically not covered and little is known, and I'm not even speaking about disasters of the Soviet period. So, as for the engraving, this is very similar to the release of energy, of the explosion of a cluster of energy. I'm not a physicist, so it's hard for me to find the terms, but it's very similar to a giant ball lightning. In other words, someone much earlier than Nikola Tesla transmitted a directional explosion at some distance. But the question is who? The answer, in my opinion, may be found in the chronicles of the Society of the Nine Unknowns, if you can find those chronicles. You can see my video about the society in my channel. I thank you for your support and your attention to my work, and if you can support me, please do so. You can find out how to do it in the description to this video. Please subscribe to my channel and tell others.